Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Eliza Van Cort wants you to reclaim your space. Today, she'll tell us how. Eliza, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, your book is entitled A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. What does that mean, claiming space?
Claiming space simply means living the life of your choosing unapologetically and bravely. And to me, bravery isn't the absence of fear. Bravery is being very afraid and doing what you need to do anyway.
Now, it sounds like there's a good backstory because early on in the book, you say you wish you had this book 25 years ago. Why do you say that? Now, I know from reading it how good it is, but tell our audience.
Well, don't you ever sit there and think to yourself, wow, if I had known this then, things would have turned out really differently. I wish I could have skipped some of the suffering and pain that brought me to all of the knowledge that I learned that I share in the book. I had a great teacher once that said, you should learn from your mistakes, but you shouldn't have to make every mistake to learn from them. And I think the nice thing about this book is that it actually allows you to circumvent some of the pitfalls that many of us go through and learn from them so that you don't have to experience them yourself. And thank you, Mr. Scarpula, for that wonderful tip.
Honestly, as I was reading the book, I felt the same way. And I love it when someone tries to do that for us. And of course, the next step is for us to take advantage of it, because who wants to go through all the mistakes we could make in life? If I can avoid stepping in that puddle, I want to walk around it. If I can avoid slipping on that ice. And of course, we can't miss everything in life, but we can skip a lot of them. And thanks to your book, and the only thing I resent a little bit, and I'm going to have a little fight with you about it now, is do you have a companion book, The Men's Guide to Claiming Space?
Well, here's the reality. A lot of the things in the book are specifically for women. But I'm not going to fight with you here,
Okay.
Bill, because
Thank you.
Because I've had a lot of men actually email me and say, my wife made me read your book for her. And I have to say, I related to a lot of it. So the reality is that I would say there's a strong, maybe 30% of it is gender specific, but there's a lot of it that anyone can benefit from. For example, the chapter on anti-mentors is universal.
Now, and I thought I was the one I said, should I admit this on radio and say that I really found this helpful? I loved it. I thought the same thing as you said. Why doesn't someone tell us this when we're about 18 or 20, or at least before we graduate, either from high school or college? Because, okay, we won't remember everything, but even 40 or 60% would have saved us so many headaches. And so many are just little tips, and I'm not diminishing them, but something small that if we notice it, like, that's why I'm buying from that salesperson rather than the other one. That's why I got taken over on that deal. This is the trap I fell into. Or this is how I can express myself better. There's so many great tips. And I thought, is there something wrong with me? I'm not a woman. Why am I enjoying this so much? But now you've clarified that.
Yeah, I think that so much of life and a lot of the advice that we get, which actually kind of bothers me, is, do this big thing. Go out there and change all of these things, change your entire life. But no one ever realizes that how we really change our life is through small incremental change that we kind of implement every day. Nobody wakes up and they're a new person. We work hard to make these little changes that have a macro effect on our whole lives. And so I wanted to write down every micro thing I could think of that I'd learned from experts and from my own personal experience and organize it in a book so people could start implementing it.
And that really is great. And I think you probably want to, if not, I'm sure somewhere else there's another book similar, but those are things that nobody bothers to write down. They learn them the hard way and say, okay, now I know it. And a lot of us say, I'm not going to share it with anybody. I had to learn it the hard way. You should do it too. And you'll know it by the time you're 50 or 60 or 70 or, some age when it then actually becomes useless. Now, one of your other title that you were considering was Conversations in the Bathroom. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah. Well, so I make my living doing talks and facilitating workshops on communication. And so almost every time I would give a talk and I would go to the bathroom after because people always want to do Q&A forever. So I'm dying to go to the bathroom. So I'm running to the bathroom afterwards and I go to the sink and a woman would come up next to me and she'd say, I got to ask you a question I didn't want to ask in Q&A. And then another woman would say, yeah, me too. And then we'd end up doing this whole workshop after the workshop in the bathroom because some people are embarrassed to ask certain questions. And I thought, we got to take these conversations out of the bathroom and into the sunlight. We really do. And so I took all of these questions, which really, I've been in Hong Kong doing talks, in Texas and New York. It doesn't matter. It was the same set of questions. We're all human beings.
And again, that's so true. I'm sure others are like myself. I don't want to raise my hand in that seminar and ask that question. And yet I'm thinking, I should ask that. And if I caught you in the hall or in between or walking to your car or a bus stop or something, yeah, I'd say, do you mind if I ask you just one question? I was ashamed to ask it in there. So once again, you're hitting on all those little points that almost like the old Seinfeld comedy show, it's all about nothing, but obviously it's about something. And these are the things we go through every day and have to live with, etc. Another thing that impressed me, and I kind of thought so as I'm reading the beginning of the book, I'm saying it's not just life lessons. There's a little more to it. And then I saw that section where you said you teach communication and acting skills. Am I correct?
Yes, I was an acting teacher for 20 years, and I'm actually gearing up to do another one in New York City for the first time since the pandemic because I miss it so much. It has to be a part of my life, so I'm going to do just one.
I'm sure it's going to be hard to stop at one because I don't think we realize when we see someone who's really doing a good acting job, it's the things you say in your book, how your posture is, how your breathing is, how you hold yourself, your pacing of a conversation. At least this is the way I find when I really go back and try to analyze why did I laugh so much at that show, or why did I really believe he was evil, or he's a good person, or he's the criminal, or he's not guilty, or she's not guilty, whatever. But it's all those little skills. And yeah. I was an practicing attorney for years, and I would actually watch people go into the court, and just by their body language, I would say, gee, I hope I'm against that attorney because he or she looks like they're going to lose today. Their body language just showed me, and others, stay away from them. They're a natural winner. They're going to be on top of the world. So the skills you portray in the book, I think, are awesome.
Thank you.
You talk about 5 qualities in the book, and I think then you break up the rest of the book on chapters that bring those out. Can you give us a brief overview of the things that we're going to, at least some of them, learn in this show today?
Yeah. So I found that people who walk in a room and everyone sort of looks at them and says, whoa, I want to listen to that person. I want to learn from that person. That person is somebody worth talking to, had 5 different aspects of their lives they were really mindful about. The first aspect was their physicality and their voice. How did they move their body in space? How did they use their words? Do they know how to modulate their voice? The second one is community. Do they have a warm, supportive community? And do they have anti-mentors out of their life? Do they make sure that that anti-mentor isn't a bullhorn sitting at the front of their table, going, hey? The next one is, how do we make sure that those big boulders that fall on us, and everybody has them, don't crush us? And I've heard so many times people in life say, you should get over it. And I don't believe it's possible to get over anything personally. I think that you get these boulders, and if you're lucky, you get them and turn them into little pebbles in your pocket, and you put them in your pocket. And when things are hard, you touch them and say, oh, I've been through this. I can do this. And you keep going. Or I remember that person and I miss them, but oh, what they gave me. And then the fourth one is how to protect yourself from aggressors. And the final one is people who uplifted those around them, particularly people who maybe didn't come from the same background. So let's say you came from intergenerational wealth and you made friends with somebody who grew up on a farm and had never been to college. People who made those efforts actually ended up being happier and more successful people.
They're so awesome. And I try to do that after I meet someone, or even if I have a dinner with them. I ask myself, why did I not like that person? Why did I get along so well with them? Why did the conversation flow so nicely? And I looked at my watch and 2 hours went by when it was supposed to be a 20-minute sit down, quickie lunch type of thing or conversation or meeting or whatever. So these tips, and I will tell our audience, we've been doing this 35 years here. This is that book, just what you say, the Claiming Space, and it's those tips that no one ever tells you, but they're so important to making a difference in your life. Eliza, before we go further, I'd like to let our audience know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Eliza Van Cort. She is the author of A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. And Eliza, we're going to ask you, would you please give us the website where we can find out more information?
Absolutely. It's ELIZAVANCORT, ElizaVanCort.com.
Occasionally, I'll be talking to someone in a book, and I know people can't get the message that quickly or change things in their life. In your book, I really believe that once we start paying attention to these things, we're going to realize why we got either hoodwinked into something we didn't want, or how we can present ourselves better in the world, so that even if it's just to get along with people or have better relationships. There's so many good tips literally on every page. And I think the whole world, I think every politician should have to read this book, but for the good things, not to use it in a negative sense. There's a quote I took out of your book, and you say that if we don't claim our space, we're invisible. I thought that's a powerful expression of really what your book is. So can you go into that and explain it a little further?
Well, I had a pretty traumatic childhood, and so the way that I dealt with it was to try to be invisible. And I thought if I was just invisible, I would be safe. And I learned pretty quickly that being invisible isn't safe. It's very dangerous. And so, a lot of people think if I can hide or I can be smaller, then no one's going to pick on me. But the reality is the more that we sort of grow and learn and we realize that the more that you can stand in your power and be comfortable with yourself, the safer you are. And so for me, that's really where my passion is helping people not be someone different, but stand in their true, authentic selves without feeling like they need to apologize for who they are.
And when you say invisible, do you mean by just being quiet and accepting what people are either giving us, throwing at us, or forcing on us, and not standing up for ourselves, so to speak? Is that what that refers to?
I think it can mean so much. I mean, when I was a little girl, what it meant for me was to hide behind a long curtain of hair and be afraid to see anyone, literally be invisible. For other people, clients, I do a lot of executive coaching. I sat in that meeting and I knew my idea was good. And for some reason, even though it was my staff, I couldn't say it. Or I feel like I have this really unkind boss and they won't stop being unkind to me. And I just can't tell them to stop because I'm afraid they won't like me. So it's just sort of, instead of speaking your mind and saying what you believe, you let other people dictate your life for you. And to me, that makes you kind of invisible.
Oh, no, so true. And I want you to know I have 3 pages of notes on your book, and that was just for this 30-minute show. And one of the other quotes I took out of there, which I love and I'm going to steal occasionally and use, but I'll give you credit because it's your quote. You say, you can't find heaven if you've shackled yourself to a road in hell.
Yep,
and
that's exactly right.
I'm guessing exactly right. That's kind of a story in your past life?
Yeah, it's a funny story, actually. I was dating a man who was a bit younger than me. And I said to my good friend, who's very wise, I don't know, maybe I'm wasting my time. Maybe I shouldn't do this. She said to me, well, Eliza, that's if you believe in the concept of time. And I said, even for you, that's kind of a weird thing to say. And she said, well, either you learn from this and then you move forward because it doesn't work, or you keep going because it does. But continuing to do something just because you want to keep going is the wrong thing. So figure out if this is working for you. If it's not, move on and learn from it. If it is, keep going. And I think a lot of times what happens is you just keep doing the same thing because you look behind you and you say, well, I spent so much time doing this. If I stop, then, oh my gosh, I've wasted so much time. But you really haven't wasted time. You've learned. And if you learn enough to make a change, it was never a waste of time. If you keep going, that's when it's a waste of time.
I just love you. Everything you say, and we're talking more or less in 1 and 2 minute segments. these are life lessons that, as you said, and right to the point, how many things we've gone through, and are we wasting time, or at least if we're learning from it? If it was a bad experience, what made that a bad experience? Why wasn't it good? Was it my fault or the person I was dating, or in your case, that you were dating? And obviously the same thing would apply to a job. Maybe we're climbing up the wrong tree. We're not meant to be a teacher or an accountant or a salesperson, and we're striving. So
Absolutely.
More good lessons. You talk about how people treat you the way they perceive you. How can we change? Let's say we're that schlumpy person, and we'll make ourselves lower than any of us probably are. But listening to you or reading your book, how would be the most obvious or quickest ways that someone could change, I'm going to say, outward appearance or whatever you think they need to change, that would start getting a different reaction from people?
I actually think the most important thing, and it's going to sound so simple, but it's what your mom and your dad told you growing up, which is stand up straight. I think that is one of the most important things. I see so many people who are slumping over a little bit. And when you do that, that just tells the world, I don't deserve to be here. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, when you're talking, don't be afraid to drop the mic. So if you've ever talked to someone and they get nervous and they keep talking because they don't know when they should end, endings are hard. Sometimes you just need to be done. And it's a real power move to stop talking. So you don't have to convince anyone of anything. Say your opinion and then stop and then see what happens.
Again, when I read that in your book, I'm thinking of a friend of mine. We were at dinner, myself and wife, herself and her husband. And she talked about 15 or 20 minutes, and I had to interrupt. I said, I hear all the words you're saying, but I have no idea if you're just telling me something that's newsworthy, if you're trying to get me to join that club, if this is a religion point or political that you're trying to get me to be on that side. I said, just tell me, where am I going? Which road am I taking here? Are you trying to get me to join? And she said, I'd like you to come to the next meeting and be part of it. I said, okay, at least I know where we're going. But she talked and I had no idea where we were going and what we were doing. You mentioned
and I think that's nerves, really.
Yeah.
I think people get nervous and they just keep talking and they don't and then it's like a freight train just going chunk, 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 chunk. And sometimes you just got to stop.
And it's also very boring. And you give so many simple tips, again, just about, we'll get into that a little later, but just about stopping and pausing. And they're so easy to pick up because you've taken the time to look at them and said, this is what makes a difference. You say in your book how many people you found just by making simple changes, they've taken advantage of these skills. Can you give us an example or two of people that you've dealt with on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'll give you one of my favorite stories. I had a woman who had a boss who was constantly telling her, making mean jokes about her. She was the only woman on the team, and he was constantly diminishing her. And eventually I said, why don't you just ask a question next time he does it? So she'd made a lot of money for the company, closed a huge deal. And he said, so happy for Jane, I'm making up her name. I hope, Jane, in front of everyone, you didn't spend all that money on a new purse. And she said, what do you mean? Just like that. Just what do you mean? And he said, well, it's funny, a new purse. And she said, it's funny that I would go spend the money I made on the deal on a new purse. And this guy next to her, who was this very bro-y dude, said, yeah, dude, that's not cool. and so, she was somebody who was really feeling beaten down at work, and just teaching her how to deal with simple microaggressions in a way that's not combative, is not going to make people feel defensive, but simply reflects back to people what they're doing. So they have to kind of own up to it. It was life-changing for her. And a lot of times that's what it is. It's just these little tiny tips that have these meta transformative effects on our lives.
And in that case,
I realize.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just want to repeat.
Oh, no.
All you told her to do is just ask a question. And she just turned it into a question and really put him back quite a bit. And perhaps he learned a lesson for the next time, not to keep trying to put her down, especially since she was doing so well in what she was doing for the company. So.
Yeah, I think asking questions is one of the best ways to deal with it when someone's coming after you, because usually a full frontal attack just makes people feel ashamed and defensive. And, why do that when you can shut it down in a different way that will cause everyone to feel a little bit okay about the interaction?
Eliza, before we go further again, I'd like our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Today, our guest is Eliza Van Cort. She is the author of A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space, and would like you to tell us the website once again that we can find out more information.
Eliza, Eliza, last name Vancort, Van Cort. So ElizaVanCort.com.
And again, I want our audience to know these tips are, I think, so good and so many little things that can change your life. If you didn't get the whole show or you want to listen to it again, you can listen to our podcast at nccradio.org. That's nccradio.org. Go to podcasts, look for Secrets of Success, and then A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. Now, you mention again in the book that sometimes these small changes, in fact, most times, small change outward can trigger a lot of internal changes. Can you explain how that works and what someone should expect? If they start doing this, what will they probably see?
Well, unfortunately, how we are treated often doesn't have a lot to do with how we feel on the inside. So we may feel like we have all kinds of ideas, but if we're presenting as if we don't feel confident, no one's going to really hear those ideas. So I think that one of the things that you can do is when you're working with somebody, when you're trying to go out and make big changes in your life, observe how people are treating you and then make just a couple simple changes. In fact, going through the book and finding those changes and then implementing them. So can you tell me the specifics of that question again? I actually heard someone in your background.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm going to switch to this one. Changing an outward something about yourself. You mentioned that this triggers radical internal changes. So I guess we'll use posture as something that if you walk down the street, of course, that's standing up straight. And someone might say, okay, I can do it like telling a little kid, get your back straight, stand up in the first grade line. But that changes internal, and I guess the way we perceive ourselves or our self-esteem. Maybe you can tell us more.
Absolutely. I do want to tell you that whoever's in your office is being very loud, and I'm worried it's being picked up by my mic.
Okay. I'm not hearing it, but maybe because I have the earphones on here. So
okay.
I will, if I see someone,
Okay.
I'll give them a wave.
Okay. So one really, really simple example is if you are someone who gets up in front of people and talks, often women will glue their elbows to the sides of their body. So I would ask everyone to stand in front of the mirror, glue your elbows to the side of your body, and move your hands. Then stop, pull your elbows out by about 1.5 inches, and do those same movements. And you will see a radical difference in the way in which you are perceived. So if you just start opening up your body a little bit when you talk, you will find that people actually listen to you more. It's a pretty stunning and simple thing to do.
Well, I love that you had a whole section on voice tips, and I think that took up one page of my notes because that's what I wanted to get into next. Again, most of these things are the things we don't notice, and yet I guess all of us have gone into a place and said, oh, I didn't want to buy that. I don't know why I did. I talked to the salesman or saleswoman, and we just talked, and she or he seemed friendly, and all of a sudden, I have a new camera that's $800, and I didn't go in there thinking I was going to buy it. And why did I get taken over that way? And that's happened to me. Can you give us some of the voice tips that you tell your clients and the people you work with? And of course, that work for actors too, because they're portraying someone and they want to convince us on screen.
Absolutely. So this is a really simple one, and it's really effective. I use it in my workshops all the time and teach people how to do it. So if you want to get people to listen to you, don't get louder, get quieter. So here's an example. I can say to you, yesterday I went to the store and I got milk and I got eggs. Or I can say, yesterday I went to the store and I got milk and I got eggs. And the reason why that second one is so interesting is that as human beings, we build intimacy by telling secrets. We're telling people, I'm talking just to you. So if you're talking and you drop your volume, people feel an intimate connection with you, and they're more likely to listen to you. The most important trick with that, though, is you don't get stuck down here. When you're done, you bump back up again so that you can make sure that you highlight the thing that you really want them to remember. And that's a great trick. It's called lifting. You just get quiet on the thing you want people to remember, and they'll remember it much more easily.
I love statistics, and I saw something in your book. Here's what I put down. You can expound on this. 7% of how we respond is based on our hearing. 93% comes from how the words are delivered. Is that accurate? Did I get that correct?
Absolutely. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to say, Bill, I don't like you. That's one thing. Or I can say, Bill, I don't like you.
And our audience can't tell, but I'm seeing two different faces. The first person I don't want around here, she's going to hit me with a ruler or smack me or something. And the second one is very inviting. And if you were selling something, I would come over and at least hear your pitch and what you have to say and what you have to tell me.
Right. So how we say our words, like there's a big difference between go away and go away, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how we hear the words is filtered through how those words are delivered. That's why when I was teaching my acting class all the time, people would take it because they wanted to be better at business or be better lawyers or whatever, because they found that they were more compelling in every aspect of their lives.
And that's what, of course, a good lawyer, if they're in going to court or just trying to convince somebody in negotiations, most of their work is verbal talking, of course, using the law in the background. But I would think that would be a big audience for you, because if people learn these tricks, and if they don't, their opponents are going to be simply using them against them. So tell us real quick, how can we start? In the next 30 seconds, what should we do tomorrow to start developing this before we go out and get a woman's guide to claiming space?
Oh, wow. That's a really hard question. I think it's more complex, but I would say one of the things you can do when you're nervous is slow down. That's another wonderful tip. We all get faster when we get nervous. We start to talk really fast, and then we get more nervous, and then we talk faster, and then we don't know what we're going to say. Slow down when you want to make a point, and you will find people listen to you much more. But I would say all of these things in totality together are really the way to go.
Oh, definitely. I just wanted to give us a starting point because, as I said, I love this. I think I'm glad you put it down in writing because, as you said very well, that this is those tips that no one tells you, but they change lives. And you've said you've seen it in and out every day. And if over 90% is how something is presented, it's not the words you use, it's the facial expressions, the hand movements, the body language, etc. I think we all need this. Before we wrap up, again, I want our audience to know the book is called A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space by Eliza Van Cort. Eliza, could you tell us again the website?
It's Eliza, E-L-I-Z-A, Van Cort, V-A-N-C-O-R-T. No U. People always put a U in court, but it's not like a courthouse.
Okay.
.com. Please join my newsletter because you're going to get lots of early bird specials on all the things that I'm doing and lots of content you won't get anywhere else.
And I think that's a great way to keep reminding us, too, if we get a newsletter and just to keep going back to this and trying some of the techniques. And obviously they're going to work, and then we're going to be really impressed. So thank you so much for alerting us to this. We'll claim that space, and we'll be very careful what we say in the bathrooms from now on. So.
Thank you so much, Bill. This was really fun.
I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.